Hello and welcome to today's episode of Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. The Society for Hospitality and Food Service Management is a community of like-minded professionals seeking educational, developmental, and networking opportunities to enrich their personal and professional goals. All right. Welcome everyone to our newest episode of Served by SHFM.
In today's episode of Served by SHFM, we're discussing the challenges the hospitality industry will face from caterers to contract accounts on opening or reopening late summer, early fall 2021. What challenges are specific to the food service industry that we need to recognize prior to reopening? Mike will also provide his insight on how to help connect on an emotional level with your guests and your team.
Today we're really lucky. We are joined by Mike Fiato. He is the Senior Vice President of Guest Experience at Eurest and author of The Hospitality Edge. Mike, you have a really interesting background. You are most definitely not the cookie cutter story of, rising to a successful career. Tell us just a little bit about your career as a whole. Where did you get started? Where did you find your passion for cooking and for hospitality?
So I think, Michael, I grew up in an Italian family, so I think I spent most of my time in the kitchen, and cooking was a natural thing, right? So, every holiday, I remember, and this probably wasn't safe, by the way, but standing on a step stool, frying shrimp with my aunts for Christmas Eve. And so I always loved food, and I loved the fact that food brought joy to people, and that just seemed really cool to me. So I wanted to do that. And, I went out and I became a chef, and I literally thought that that's all I would do. I loved being a chef. I loved cooking. I loved running kitchens. And then there was this trip to Disney that just changed my life. It just threw everything upside down, and it threw me in a whole different direction that I never expected.
I read that. What was so profound? I mean, obviously Disney, a trip to Disney has a profound impact on a lot of people, but yours was very specific in that it wasn't necessarily the trip itself. It's something that happened.
Yeah. So, I think you have certain expectations. I mean, it's the happiest place on earth. We know that before we go. But I don't know that I expected to see what happened from the frontline associates. I think that, companies, you always struggle to divide kind of task and purpose, like what you're there to do and then what your purpose is there. And just running into all the associates that worked at Disney, and particularly this one housekeeper, it was just more than I expected. And I think, I just walked away thinking, gosh, I should do that. Like I should be training folks to love their job so much that it just reflects on the guests that are there. And, that's what that housekeeper and that's what that whole episode did for me.
That's awesome. So there are also quite a few interesting things about you. So you play ice hockey and you live in Florida. How did you get into ice hockey?
Yeah, lucky for me that when I moved, so I lived in Boston, and if you guys don't know, everybody in Boston plays hockey of some sort.
I have heard.
So, that makes more sense than Florida. Okay.
So that's the truth. And then when I moved to Florida, I did play a little bit of what they call roller hockey out here, where you wear rollerblades and you play on a roller rink. And then, not too long after I moved here, the Tampa Bay Lightning came here, and we have bunches of rinks now, all kinds of folks playing. And, so many people that live in Florida come from up north or somewhere else or Canada. So there's actually great hockey in Florida, and I love playing.
That's awesome. Would have never thought.
Well, in going back to your trip to Disney, I know that was kind of a fork in the road in your career where previously you were a restaurant owner, successful, happy, loved doing it, but you found from what I understand, this moment of kind of seeing the bigger picture in hospitality and understanding maybe really the meaning of the word of hospitality in a lot of ways. Going back to that moment, what did you do in your career? Was it an aha moment where you just said, I have to change? Or was this the first step in a gradual build to really taking the time to understand hospitality?
So I think part of it was gradual. I think most chefs and probably most people listening to this podcast read Danny Meyer's Setting the Table book. It's one of the greatest restaurant books, and he alludes to hospitality a lot throughout the book. I think the trip to Disney just kind of pushed me over the edge, where it was like, hospitality is not the business I'm in. Hospitality is actually the most powerful business strategy there is. And these businesses that connect emotionally with their guests always have unprecedented success. And it just, I think it just came alive to me that day, Michael, when I saw this happen. And it was just like, that's what I need to be doing.
And so you married your high school sweetheart. How did this conversation go over at home? I mean, this very abrupt change from I need to sell my restaurant and take this different career path. How was that managed?
So I remember, fairly distinctly telling my wife that I wanted to sell the restaurant. I wanted to do something else. And I think her first, thought process was, you want to move dolls around hotel rooms? And I was like, no. It's a bigger picture, right? I just think it's time for me to do something else, and to go, kind of spread this joy and create happiness in the workplace. And then when you create happiness in the workplace, then of course that's just going to transition to your guests and the folks you take care of. Hiring the right people and being around kind of like-minded people when it comes to hospitality just makes work so joyful. And I think at times our business misses that because it can be grinding and it can be difficult and the hours can be long. And I guess I just wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do something different.
So you mentioned that your wife responded with wanting to move dolls around hotel rooms. What is that specifically in reference to?
So here, I'll give you the short version. So when we went to Disney, we went with our family and one of my nieces couldn't go. I didn't tell you guys, I don't have children. It seems like a lot of work, but I did have this niece. So I bought her this giant Mickey Mouse doll and I put the doll in my room. And the first day we went out to the park and we had a wonderful time. But when we came back, I noticed that Mickey wasn't where I left him. Mickey was now sitting in the bed. He had a clicker in one hand, Coke in the other. He's watching TV. And guys, I've seen movies where dolls come alive. It's usually not good for you.
Definitely not.
So, what I realized afterwards is that Mickey didn't come alive, but that the housekeeper came in, did the turn down service, and she positioned him in this way. And on the second day, we went out to the park, and I was kind of wondering, a little distracted. We went to Epcot, and I was thinking, does Mickey have another trick, or will he be doing the same thing when I get back? So when we got back to the room, Mickey was now standing on the desk. He had all my workout gear on, which looked ridiculous on him, my Walkman. It looked like he's going to go for a run. And I just thought, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. The last day that we're in the park, I'm totally distracted. I just want to get back to the room and see what Mickey's doing, but my wife was out there and we had to do the rides and all the stuff. So when we come back, guys, I walk into the room and Mickey is gone. She stole my mouse. And I thought to myself, I'm in the happiest place on earth. How could this possibly happen? So I knew he had to be in the room. So I looked under the bed and Mickey wasn't there. And I looked in the closet, Mickey wasn't there. So now I'm angry. I'm going to go down to the front desk and kind of report this and what's happened. But as I'm storming out of the room and I go by the bathroom, on the bathroom door is the sign that says, "Do not disturb." And I thought, what's Mickey doing in there? And I'm kind of nervous. And I open the door and I peek in. And Mickey's sitting in the bathtub, shower cap on his head, bar of soap in his hand. And I just went, wow. I worked in hotels, right? I know how hard it is to be a housekeeper. And somehow this place trained her that cleaning my room was a task that she did every day. And she was really good at it. But making an impression on me, doing something that I would never forget was really her task, like her purpose, why she worked at Disney. And I've told this story so many times. She did that. And that's the part that really just astounded me is that, she knew why she was there. She knew what she was there to do, and she executed it flawlessly and created a memory I'll never forget.
That's awesome. And as you were going through the story, I'm thinking of where would I put Mickey? Would Mickey be taking a nap or would Mickey be reading a book?
Well, I think I'm sorry, Danny, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, do you ever think that such a little thing like the hotel staff going the extra mile would impact you so much? And was it kind of that aha moment to build into a more gradual change?
So, I think first of all, in our business and everybody that's listening, I think whoever said don't sweat the small stuff wasn't in the restaurant business, because we're all about the small
Amen.
stuff. It's the small stuff that people remember, the packaging that you send something to someone, the little sauce that you put on the side, the fresh avocado with lemon juice. It's the small stuff. And I think that, Danny, is what grabbed my attention, is that, she has a difficult job. She has to clean rooms in 14 minutes, but she always found a couple of minutes to do something special, something extra for us. And, that was magic.
It is, especially when you think of housekeepers, you're not supposed to see them. You're not really supposed to know that they were there unless, your room is turned down. So for them to go that extra mile and do something fun is really great.
Yeah. And I think it speaks volumes in our industry of how important the interaction is that we have every single time with a guest. Because if you take this story and then you expand it out into how it's impacted your career, you had one individual that went above and beyond the stereotypical view of that role, which is clean the room and leave. They went beyond to make an impactful moment for you. And how that's changed your career path and how many people you've impacted positively because of it. Hundreds of thousands of interactions over the course of your career with guests. And that's I think that speaks volumes about the power of our industry. And every moment that we have is an opportunity to create something and leave it better than where we found it.
Yeah, I think, Michael, when you look at it like life, it's always showtime and you're always on. And I don't know that I had that opinion before. I always separated back of the house and front of the house. But, the reality is, if you want to create great experiences for guests, you first have to create great experiences for the people that work for you. So really the guest is second and the team is first, and creating that environment and that atmosphere that inspires great service. And, that was a big change for me. I always had, the customer's always right. All of the things that you hear in the business was the direction that I went. And then I realized, gosh, I'm doing this wrong.
That's wow. You don't get maybe you do get a lot of moments like that in life, but I think taking advantage of them and recognizing them is probably the biggest challenge there. And
Mm-hmm.
and in your, I feel like we could go for days just talking about different aspects of your career. From, a lot of it, I feel like within Compass, your career started almost with an almost failure. Maybe we just talk about that real quick and how you started there and then almost failed.
Yeah. So being humble is great, right? And I think, one of the things I may not have been when I joined Compass was humble. And, a job came available in the local marketplace. I applied for it, but I had only been with Compass for a couple of months. And kind of the rule was you had to be in your spot for 6 months before you could apply for a new job. Miraculously, right, I got the job. And I remember going back to Tom Charletta, who was my manager at the time, and saying, Tom, look how awesome I must be. They gave me this job, right? And this is great. And then, Tom kind of shook his head and walked away. And it come to find out that this account was actually a manager killer, right? It had gone through 4 or 5 managers, really demanding client. And I went in there and I was certain that I could turn this around, that I had the skills and the ability to do it. And I got to tell you guys, I was failing, and having never failed before at this level, I didn't know what to do. And I think, I kind of forgot about the Disney thing at the time and was trying all these things to try to fix my situation. And I remember Chef David came into my office, and I had a lot of my hospitality stuff out on the desk. And he said, well, what's all this? And I said, well, this is a hospitality platform that I'm building that I'd like to put into effect one day. And he kind of looked at it all. He goes, well, why don't we just do this here? I don't know. That seems like a good idea.
You mean all the things I've been trying to do?
So we put the platform in place. And again, just really lucky being in the right place at the right time. The client ended up extending our contract for 10 years. Rick Post came down and looked at the account. We became a center for excellence. And, it makes you think that in life, there are very few coincidences, and everything happens for a reason. I was supposed to go to Disney. I was supposed to go work for a contract food company that I had never heard of before. I found to me, I'm blessed. Eurest is the best job I've ever had. I work with the best group of people I ever had. And, it just seems to me that this was all supposed to happen.
Beautiful. I mean,
Really
sometimes
is.
it's amazing when those things just kind of take the right path, maybe the one you were meant for. And I mean, it seems like all of this has led to maybe one of the bigger challenges you've seen or we're going to see as an industry, and that is reopening.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants us to harp on COVID or anything like that, but there were things that changed in our industry that are long-term changes that we're going to run into with reopening. I mean, maybe we can touch on those. What are some of the biggest challenges, not just in contract food service, but across the board that we're going to see in reopening this year?
Yeah, so I'll start first on the positive side. So when it comes to creativity, innovation, and those types of things, nobody's better than people in the hospitality industry. They understand kind of what's in front of them, the challenges, and they're able to work through those challenges. I think, for us, we were lucky, Michael, in the fact that some of our business was essential and stayed open the whole time. So we were connected to frontline associates and connected to guests and be able to understand what people were looking for and when they were looking for it. And that's going to really help us with reopening. For instance, forever in any food service survey in any industry, guests always talk about quality, variety, and value. But all of a sudden, safety became the number one concern. And guests were really concerned about how safe your space was. So we went to work in creating training with our safety teams and working directly with the frontline associates to make the space feel safe. In all the surveys that we did after that in our Voice of the Customer platform, 93% of the people in our business felt safe. The guests felt safe. So that was kind of the price of admission. And you had to make them feel safe first, and then they came down and they patronized you. I think after that, a lot of the trends that we saw, was funny. I think that people were home for so long and maybe tired of the 3 or 4 things that they knew how to make. And so the guests got very adventurous. And, our culinary team, Chris Ivans-Brown and Lisa Lahiji, put together mashups and did some really creative, adventurous food. And the guests loved that. The other thing that we saw is health and wellness became a huge driver, maybe where before guests talked about it, but I wasn't so sure they were serious about it. But coming back from COVID, people were taking care of themselves. Or on the flip side, maybe they gained a few pounds being at home and they wanted to lose that weight. So, we saw guests being more adventurous. We saw wellness being a driver. I think the safety piece kind of ended up taking care of itself. And let's face it, in contract food specifically, the guests are used to seeing us out there with thermometers, taking temperatures and doing charts and those things. So they realize that we take safety very, very seriously as well. But yeah, I think, the other thing, maybe Michael and Danny, the work week is going to change, right? People are going to work from home. Maybe the visits to the office will be far more purposeful than they've been before. And I think all of that really leads to food being even more important than it was before, because food is a place where you come together, you collaborate, you innovate. And I think food at the office is going to be maybe more important than it was prior to COVID.
That's awesome. As you were talking, Mike, I've heard you use the word guest quite a bit and not client. Can you expand or talk to us about why you made that transition and how it alters how you view our industry?
Yeah, so I think there's particularly when the millennials came into the workforce, I think there was a lot of focus on driving experience. We knew that millennials were really experience driven. You could see that through social media. And so the whole idea was you wanted to elevate things. So if you think like back in the day, it was probably okay when our business was called a cafeteria. But today, nobody wants to eat in a cafeteria and nobody wants to work in a cafeteria, right? We are now marketplaces, which is a much better description of what we do. I think when you look at customer and guests, one of the things that we realized is that the word customer is really transactional, right? It's a transactional term. And in a lot of businesses, the word customer actually has a negative connotation. So it was kind of an easy change for us. Let's elevate the folks that patronize us. Let's call them guests. And that elevation works on both sides, because if you think when you're working in a space, and let's say a guest comes to your house, you put them in the best seat, you get them food, you get them drinks, right? You treat guests at a different level. So it was an easy transition for us. And I've got to tell you that we have a communication app to our frontline associates. And when we asked them, which term should we use? Overwhelmingly, the front line, and I'm going to tell you, we had hundreds of replies in the first day. They loved the idea of calling our patrons guests. So it was an easy transition, Danny, and it was the right thing to do.
That's awesome.
That makes sense, because when you look at it too, you always want a guest in your home. Everybody loves to have a guest in their home. But when you think about it as just a customer, it's that transactional, okay, you give them this and they go away. You know, we've completed a service for you. Now our interaction is done. But with a guest, it's not just that moment. It is the ongoing relationship. And I think that's really important in our industry. It's not just posting transaction and getting things done. It's building long-term relationships, whether that person is a giant client or someone just coming into your restaurant for the first time.
And much like with guests, you will have difficult ones. But at least when you don't have the word transaction, like customer, which is more transactional, it's like, okay, we're done. But with the guest, you still have to make the most of it despite a negative experience or a negative attitude. Like you're still putting a lot of work into maintaining that relationship, just like Mike said.
Yeah, and I think it defines, like, those, and Danny Meyer says this great, the two pieces of hospitality. There's, the kind of technical piece, right, which is making sure you're open on time and the tables are clean and you have food. Like, all of that's super important. It's the price of admission to get you in. But hospitality is really how you make people feel about the transaction. So elevate the people that work there, elevate the guests that come in for service, and ultimately, right, you're going to get this just better feel about what you deliver. And I think that's just a big part of it.
It's an emotional relationship in a lot of ways.
It sure is. Yeah. And emotion is big, right? I think emotion drives so much of what we do. And right now we're speaking about COVID. The one thing that we are seeing from guests is just more of an emotional attachment to the space. They crave to be seen. They crave attention. We've missed them. They've missed us. So there's a lot of emotion in the marketplace right now, and it's positive and it's valuable.
Speaking of emotions, we know that emotion also tends to drive behavioral changes. What kind of behavioral changes can we expect from our guests while we're reopening?
Yeah, so a couple of big ones, right? So I'm pretty sure by going to the front door that my wife always knew how to use the Amazon app. But there's a lot of people out there that prior to COVID had never ordered anything from a phone app. So the digital piece of now digital ordering, that's going to be a part of our business that's never going to go away. It's a great piece to the customer journey, right? It enables the guest to be able to place an order, pick things up when they want, work around their schedules. So, I think when you look at mobile ordering in our business, that's here to stay. I think the other piece was just social media. Maybe people that didn't spend time on social media before are spending time now. And people, you watch people, they just go through those reels over and over and over again. So, if you want to get people to come down to the marketplace for lunch, maybe around 9:00, you put a reel on of a great stock you're making or shrimp that you're peeling and get the guests excited to come into the marketplace and have lunch with you. So I think social media and technology and the way that those two things enhance the guest experience, kind of create emotion around the transaction, those aren't going away. I think those are a permanent part of our business.
That's fascinating. And switching gears a little bit, catering is a huge part of our industry, whether you are a food service management company, you own a restaurant, or really everything in between, or you're a dedicated catering company. We're seeing changes in that, obviously. And can you talk about some of the changes that we're going to see this summer and this fall across our industry?
Yeah, so here's one, Michael. We didn't really see this coming. So in preparation for COVID, for our business that was open and was essential, we put out a specific menu that was like COVID friendly, where everything was packaged, everything was individual. And, we did that for the safety concerns. After doing that and now kind of coming out of COVID, the guests loved these personalized individual boxes. We also sent boxes to the homes of people that weren't coming back to work, but were working from home. So what you're going to see, at least in addition to our catering menus, is more packaged options, more personal options, more options that you can send to a colleague or a coworker that's going to join your meeting, but they're going to join it remotely. So you send it to their home. I think there's going to be big changes, particularly, in corporate dining when it comes to that and it comes to catering.
Are there any other food trends that you see that we could take advantage, much like what you're saying with catering, of being able to send things ahead of time so people feel included in the moment with their team?
Yeah, so, I think that inclusiveness is going to be a big piece. And I think understanding, Danny, when they're going to bring the creative teams back to the spaces, because I do think that when it comes to collaboration and innovation, it's hard to replace that. But right now, they're all meeting remotely. So I think it's a matter of creating that feeling that you're together, even though you're not really together. And nothing does that better than food, like a working lunch where you guys are all opening your boxes and maybe they're not all the same. Look, I got this, I got that. And they're sharing that kind of moment over food. I just think it's classic.
Makes me think of a Wonder Ball.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just like everybody getting excited to see what they got.
Well, aren't there those really retailers? So I remember reading about retailers out there that you send $50 and they send you a box and you don't know what's in the box. So maybe this is food solution to that. But I will just say that guests have just really enjoyed it. And it has been just a huge part of our business through COVID. And again, I don't think it's going to go away. I think we'll continue with this.
Really hits on that millennial idea of wanting that experience, right? Like opening and unboxing is an experience. That's why it's a big thing to do on YouTube is you get new things and you're like, oh, let me record me unboxing this thing I purchased and share it with the internet.
Yeah, true. It's fun.
Mike, do you see hesitancy or people tiptoeing into the idea of large catered events again? Or are we seeing that, being embraced across the board?
So I think the big thing that we learned, Michael, was just hesitancy. So clients became really curious about what other clients were doing. And I think, initially we weren't sharing that information, but as soon as we did, we saw catering really start to open up again. I think one of the good things, if anything good came out of COVID, is that there hasn't been a lot of COVID outbreak directly attached to food, the handling of food, supermarkets. So we're seeing, a resurgence in catering. We're seeing guests more interested in catering. And again, just that real desire for information. What's happening out there? What are other companies doing? What are other guests doing? There's been a big need for that.
One thing that is on everybody's mind right now, it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, is the obvious labor shortage that everyone is seeing. Now, I know there's not all that much that can be done about that, but I do think that could potentially impact guest experiences. What's a game plan for making sure that labor shortages and all the hurdles that come with that have a minimal impact on guest experience?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, there's a lot of discussion around this. I think people's first inkling is to try to reopen with less people, but do what we did before. And I can assure you guys, that's not going to work. You're going to end up burning out your people and not giving a great experience to the guests that come in. So I think the first thing to do is to scale the business to your staffing model to make sure that the experiences that you're giving out are still great experiences on both sides, for the associate and for the guest. I think the other part, and maybe more importantly, Michael, hiring interviewing skills are now more important than they've ever been, and making sure that you get the right people. Because the other thing that I can assure you is when you hire the wrong people, all of the fancy training techniques in the world aren't going to fix that. So you've got to hire people that love people. And what I love about hospitality is the skills are transferable, right? I don't necessarily need somebody that's waited tables before, but I need somebody that loves people, that loves food, that loves a fast pace. And we can train you to do that. And I think, when it comes to hiring now, that everybody's caught up on the signing bonuses and paying people to fill out applications. And I think all of that's the price of admission. But guys, that's not the answer. The answer comes down to selecting the right people, right? Putting the right ad in the paper. There's a lot of really high quality associates out there now that are looking for work. They're looking for a home. And if you guys don't mind, just to give you an obscure kind of analogy.
Yes.
Yeah. I love it already.
Yeah. So my wife, she loves like these home shows. Like they buy an old house and they destroy the inside and then they fix it and then they sell it, right? And I watch these shows with her, but my favorite part is when they stage the house. So like they put furniture back in it and they make it look a certain way. And you think to yourself, well, what are they trying to do? Well, what they want to happen is that when a potential buyer walks into that house, they connect with it emotionally. They look at that house and they think to themselves, I could see myself living here. And I think, guys, that's what interviews have to become. You have to invest the time and the effort in the interview, sell the workplace so that person that you're interviewing sees themselves working there. And that's the hurdle, because as you said, Michael, there's a lot of availability. There's a lot of competition out there. And it's not a numbers game, it's a quality game.
That is, as someone who's been and hired a lot of people in my career, I could not agree any more than how important what you just said was. If anybody is looking to hire right now, they should probably rewind and listen to that again, because it's 100% not about filling the position. It's about finding the right person and energizing that person to be ecstatic and excited about the career path that they're jumping off with you.
Yeah, I think it's why family businesses work so well, because, in a family business, everybody belongs, everyone has a task, everyone has an opinion, everyone has a say. And that's the way it should be, because ultimately these frontliners are running your business every single day. And if you're not kind of tapped into that, it just doesn't work. And particularly with the younger generation, millennials and Gen Zs, they're looking for coaches and partners. They're not looking for someone to boss them around and tell them what to do. So I just think the workplace has changed and we have to change with it.
I think that's a very good point that, it is changing. And much like you were talking about earlier with the housekeeper at Disney, it's people, your Gen Z, your millennials are coming to the workplace wanting more than just a paycheck. It's, why are we doing this? What is this purpose? Am I here just to, clock in and clock out? Because I could do that anywhere. Whereas if you give me something else, if you're going to invest in me, or you're going to provide or help me connect with some really outstanding human beings, then I want to be in that workplace, right? I tend to think a lot about how people will work for certain companies that will do recycling or managing rubbish pickup. And some of those people in those offices are probably a lot happier than other folks. Why is that? Because they have a purpose to their work.
It's such a great point. And people want to work for companies that align with their values. And this for us is probably it's not that makes it an easy sell, but it's such a great purpose. You think about what we do, and, we're not hiring people to make sandwiches or to put chips on a rack or cookies in a bag, right? We're hiring people because we're out there, we're nourishing, we're taking care of America's greatest companies. And think about, like, during the COVID lockdown, we worked with a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, some of the companies that created the vaccine. What greater purpose is that? You're nourishing and taking care of somebody that's going to put an end to this pandemic. So, I think that part is so important, Danny, just aligning people and merely defining what it is we're trying to do here. We create happiness, right? That's what
Mhm. I love that.
And that again touches, because you know, going back to how your career kind of started down this path, you never know when one of those interactions is going to be critical in someone's life, and it could be as small as turning their day around from, you know, they had a bad day to they walk out of a marketplace or they walk out of an interaction with one of the team members just a little bit lighter, a little bit happier, or you know, that small change can make a huge difference in somebody's life. And I think one of the most beautiful things about the hospitality industry is we have the ability to be a part of those interactions a lot more than other industries do.
Yeah, you have an impact on people's lives every day. It's just a choice you make. Once you've made that choice to have a positive impact on people, everything gets better.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I mean, I feel like we could go through this all day and even talk more about your career and all those wonderful things. But we just wanted to say, you know, a big thank you to you for taking the time to sit down and talk with us about some of the challenges that we're going to have in reopening. And those are big, but they are not insurmountable. And I think our industry is going to be better for it. And we wanted to say a big thank you to Eurest for loaning you out to us for a little bit as well. And Danny, I know we have a wonderful question we try to ask everybody on this show. Do you want to jump in on that?
I would love to. This is my favorite question to ask people. My favorite, most lovely question. So before we end, if you could reach back through time and tell the younger Mike, just starting out in his professional career, taking that first step on that journey, what piece of advice would you give him?
That is really a tough question because there's so many things that you think you might do differently. I think the first thing I would say is to always think the best of people. You know, give people the benefit of the doubt and don't have preconceived notions about the people you meet, the people you interact with. I think the second thing I would say is to be curious. At times, you know, when you're in a profession, you think you know everything, and then, you know, you're certain to miss everything if that's the case. So stay curious. And I think the last thing that I would say is there's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should listen twice as much as you speak. You'll be surprised what you gather.
I love it.
I think I needed to hear that, especially the part about giving people the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes it's easy in our professions to get a little burnt out and a little jaded, and that can start to really influence negatively the way you perceive, you know, whether you know it or not, new interactions and new relationships. So yeah, I think those are powerful points.
A little bit of empathy goes a long way.
Big time. Yeah.
So, well, this was profound. This was fantastic. We really appreciate you jumping on with us. And, you know, our best to everyone at Eurest, and good luck with all the reopenings. And we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the time. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Served by SHFM, your food service hospitality podcast. Please keep in mind that the views and opinions expressed on today's episode are not necessarily those of SHFM or any of its members.